So this event is actually organized by the UN Economic Commission for Africa and the African Diaspora Network. And I'm so grateful to the team, Gideon, and of course, Toko, who just left, but she still is there in spirit. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And we're delighted also to have incredible speakers with us, which I will introduce shortly. Today we have, from the registrants, we have about 40 countries presented, and the top registrants come from the United States, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, and UK, which is really wonderful. So welcome everybody, and great to have you. This, as I said, it's organized by the UNECA. For those of you who may not know about UNECA, although I do believe many of you do, the UNECA promotes the economic and social development of its member states, foster intra-regional integration, and promote international cooperation for Africa's development. I have seen them work in action during my tenure on the high-level panel on migration, and I'm very, very impressed by what they do and what the potential is. And the goal for us is to figure out a way to work together while they do the policy. Where can we meet them on other kind of diaspora development? So really delighted for this partnership. And Gideon, thank you for the hard work. And I really, really appreciate you for making this possible. And of course, our sister Toko for being the champion that she is, and so grateful. Thank you. I am, again, as I said, Almaz Negash. I'm with the African Diaspora Network for the last 11 years, even though I'm so happy to see many people are now talking about diasporans. I've always known that the diaspora was a force to reckon with. We are a good, if we are used, we could be a force for good. And I'm very happy to say that we see this happen a lot. I've always thought if that community is the largest investor in any country, then I think the governments and everyone else, it's to their best interest to engage with the diaspora. I'm very happy to say that from the government in the United States, there's a huge diaspora engagement plan to what's happening in many different countries in Africa to engage with their own diaspora. I am so delighted that the issue is now way at the core of a discussion of any policy and investment related. So it's wonderful to be with you. We at ADN are very happy to have that space, and we have community we depend on to make the work we do possible. We focus on our strategic direction for the next couple of years is going to be on education, healthcare, connectivity, and finance. How do they show up? We have 4 programs in which then we implement and make sure these programs are addressed on a regular basis. It's with the African Diaspora Investment Symposium. This is our core convening, a global convening that we do in Silicon Valley every year. The 7th one is coming up in June 22. We will do in person, but from January to May, it will be virtual, and hopefully you will join. And the person who's responsible for this is Megan. Megan also made this today possible. So thank you, Megan, and my team, Deborah Pasillo, both of them are here. So thank you for what you do. The second one is the Impacted Innovation Forum. So if in a good day, we would have done this event in New York, which we've done in 2018 and 19 in person, but of course, due to COVID, we're just doing this virtually, but it is under the Impact and Innovation Forum that we're serving you today, because we have an ongoing yearly convening that we do in Silicon Valley, Washington, and New York, and this is one of them. So just a perfect opportunity to get together, even if it's only virtually. The other one is the Builders of Africa's Future, where we identify 10 to 12 entrepreneurs from the continent. We bring them to Silicon Valley for mentoring, training, and of course, to pitch to potential funders. We've done that for 4 years. The 5th one is coming up in June. Hopefully some of you will join us. And then out of that, we just created another program we developed called Accelerating Black Leadership and Entrepreneurship. Yes, we do care about the continent where we come from, but also the community in which we live. And this program addresses exactly that. We have funding that we've received from a local foundation and also a fintech company, a corporation in Silicon Valley, to help African Americans and diasporans to get access to training. And then of course, which is the hardest thing, is getting financing And that opportunity we hope to open. We just announced the 16 on entrepreneurs on Tuesday, and we look forward to collaborating with all of you, and those of you especially who live in the United States, to be a part of this movement. That's what ADN does, and then I would be happy to answer any questions you may have during the conversation. So what do we have for today? We have today, I'm going to have Ms. Yamuro from UNECA give an introductory remark, and then we'll go to Professor Fall to give us his context on diaspora remittances, who he has done so much work than anyone I know in this sector. So we're very, very delighted and honored to have you. And then we'll start our panel discussion, and there will be a Q&A and then closing remarks at about 8:25. I think one of the questions that we want to address are pretty much how do we leverage the diaspora resources to benefit the continent, plus also the communities in which we live. What collective power and leverage do remittances provide for communities across the continent? This is going to come out alive when Toko talks about what's the need in the communities and what can we do. How are diaspora communities key enablers in landscape of development, finance in Africa? This could be a discussion for many of the panelists, but also what kind of innovative financing mechanisms are happening. You will hear this from Aurea, who's working with the UN development, with the UNDP. And so we're very, very happy to have each one of them. And then of course, we always ask ourselves, what is this? This is not, a one-off. The discussion about remittances has been going on for years, and it will go on for years. And so the continuing conversation, this is not you start today and you find a solution. It's going to take a lot of us having a deeper discussion and imagination of what's possible on a regular basis to find a way to make sure that remittances are scalable and communities in Africa are living a dignified life. And that is really our dream, all of us, especially those of us in the diaspora. We left our home to come for better life and to provide our people with better life. So we're very excited about the opportunity to work with all of you. But the question, the ongoing discussion will be, how can we scale remittances? What steps do we need to take to change policies or maybe even implement policies? How do we move from policy to action? And how do we create trusted space for such a discussion? And so with that, I'm going to ask, let me just introduce the panelists. It's not easy to read when you're doing a shared, when you're sharing a screen, but I'm very happy to share that Edla Mabera is currently the Director on Gender, Poverty, and Social Policy Division at the UNECA, and so grateful to have you. And we will share the full bio that you all can read. Professor Fall is a partner at GKI and since 2004, and is visiting professor in practice at London School of Economics. He's currently consulting with the Africa Union, and I'm sure he will discuss more details about what he's doing. So very grateful to have you with us. Aurea is the SDG Finance and South-to-South Cooperation Advisor within UNDP, Africa Finance Sector Hub based in Pretoria, South Africa. Aurea is incredible. I've had a great opportunity to discuss with her about this with her team and what they are doing. So really delighted to have you, Aurea. My wonderful friend, Toko, she just retired from UNECA. I'm smiling because I have seen her in action, but the one thing that made me smile this morning is how people loved her. I stayed for the 1 hour and a half or 2 hours going party for Toko, and it was the most beautiful going party one can give you, even if it was virtual. The energy was incredible. And Toko has spent her life on working on gender, poverty, and social policy issues. She cares about this, and you will hear her say some of the ideas that she has for us to continue to make things possible. For the panel discussion, I'm going to ask each one of you to take 1 minute to talk about yourself. Toko, do you want to share some of your views in 1 minute about who you are, what you care about?
Thank you very much, Almaz. maybe before I talk about myself, because really right now there's not much to say about myself, I want to especially acknowledge Edlam, the acting director of the Gender, Poverty and Social Policy Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, who I've worked with for most of my time in that particular division. Edlam, it was a joy to hand over to you, and I can see you're leading the division, especially the work on migration, with interest and a lot of enthusiasm. And also to acknowledge Gideon, who worked so hard to get this meeting to happen, and to happen so quickly. Because I remember, Almas, when we discussed this idea, it was really close to UNGA, but he has made it happen. Congratulations, Gideon. There's not much for me to say about myself. I think you can see from my face, I have retired. I was in the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and I finished as the director at the end of August this year. When I handed over to Edlam, who you can see on the screen. It really is a pleasure for me to be back home. Right now, I'm taking time to rest. And when I retired at the end of August, we had just finished the Africa Global Compact on Migration Review, which went extremely well. And I'm excited that there were a lot of very good ideas and cutting edge issues that came out of that review that will be shared at the global review in May next year. I think that's what I can say about myself right now, because I'm still trying to find my feet and I'm back home in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toko. Actually, you did my work on Edlam. Edlam, thank you for being here with us. Actually, the floor is yours to give an introductory remark on UNECA and what you're doing. So Edlam, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that, Almaz, and the warm welcome. And I think the really interesting insight as to who's here, what kind of a discussion we're here to have, and so on and so forth. As Toko said, I've just taken over the role of acting director for the Gender, Poverty and Social Policy Division of ECA. All of us miss Toko as much as you've said, Almaz. I think she really was a force behind much of the work that has been happening around migration at the UN Economic Commission for Africa. I think, Almaz, you did introduce what the UNECA stands for. The Economic Commission for Africa, dear participants, is the regional arm of the United Nations that supports African countries, African member states on policies for socioeconomic transformation. We support them in various ways. And of course, the migration and the diaspora agenda is really a central one. Personally, I've just taken up the position of acting director, but I also put on another hat. Perhaps what I've done for most of my life is to work on urban planning, urbanization, and urban development globally, but also more closely recently within the African context. Of course, certainly an agenda that is closely linked to the migration and diaspora discussions that we will be having today. So I do wish to welcome everyone to this discussion today, Almaz, and thank you, our collaborators, for this fantastic event and opportunity that we have ahead of us. I also bring you the compliments of the ECA more broadly, my colleagues that have been behind the preparation of this event. As I said, the question of migration, the issue of the diaspora is certainly a priority for the African continent, particularly because of the clear development potential of migration more broadly, but also the diaspora that already are very much supporting the growth and transformation of the continent in many ways, in various ways, be it through knowledge, ideas, trade, investment, and so on and so forth. And so we recognize very much in the African continent that migration is a catalyst for realizing the Sustainable Development Goals and Africa's own Agenda 2063 agenda. Almaz, you made some references to remittances. Certainly, we know that the contribution of remittances in Africa is really massive, amounting to about $78 billion in October 2020. And really, this accounts for 11.7% of global remittances. So the scale of it is really huge. Yet we also recognize that there still remains huge untapped potential. And I think if we contextualize this in sort of the dynamics within the continent, whereby resource mobilization is such a top priority, an area of need to finance our development, investments, remittances, and the potential to boost remittances, and also to leverage the contribution of the diaspora, not just through remittances, actually, in many other ways, is really profoundly important. And just to give a sense, of course, we know that, for at least 18 African countries, remittances account for more than 2% of GDP. Really, the figures and the scale is just, I would say, remarkable. And as I said, the potential is yet untapped. Some of the countries where there is a significant contribution of GDP in the African continent includes those such as South Sudan, where 34% of GDP is accounted for by remittances. It's a third of a country's GDP, ranging to also other countries such as Lesotho, which relies on remittances for about 21% of GDP, and so on and so forth. So the scale of remittances and the financial and investment contribution of the diaspora for the African continent is very evident, and it's very clear. So the potential for Africa to harness this is really considerable. And as I said, there is still room to put in the institutional frameworks, the financial regulatory systems, and really, I would say, the incentives for the diaspora to continue to support the development of the continent through resources and through other means. When it comes to remittances, we do know that there's still room to reduce the high costs that the diaspora face around remittances. There is a possibility to make more formal channels of remittance transfers accessible to the diaspora. And certainly also there is huge potential to leverage digitization and digital transformation to really bring Africa's diaspora and the African continent closer together. I would also want to highlight that it's important to consider the shifts that are taking place in the continent and the opportunities that are arising related to some of these shifts. And prominent among these would be the African Continental Free Trade Area, which, as we all know, is really a major milestone for the continent, and trading has started in 2021. This Continental Free Trade Area is expected to enable countries to trade more with one another, to manufacture more and trade within the continent. And we expect this Continental Free Trade Area to substantially boost jobs, investment opportunities, trade, and economic growth in the region. And this is a real potential, an opportunity whereby we can link questions of diaspora and the contribution of the diaspora to such emerging opportunities. The coming into force of this kind of an agreement provides a tremendous potential and opportunity for the diaspora to invest, to engage, and really be part of this transformation. From a policy perspective, I do think that the commitment and the political will around leveraging both migration and diaspora, the potential of the diaspora specifically, is really quite favorable. As Toko mentioned, and as most of us may know, for instance, the Global Compact on Migration serves as really a valuable global framework that elevates the potential and role of migration in development discussions and debates, including the Sustainable Development Goals. We just concluded a fantastic regional discussion and review of the Global Compact on Migration, really debating on what is the potential of migration to become a factor of development for the African continent. And within that also, of course, the role of the diaspora is of paramount importance. Next year, we are all going to the International Migration Review Forum. Again, I would say that at the global level, this presents us with another opportunity, really, to continue to come together and to join hands around these important agendas. So really, I just want to kind of bring this together and say that the evidence is there, demonstrating that the diaspora has the potential of being part of Africa's transformation and trajectory of growth and development. And a lot is certainly happening in the continent, but it's not enough, and we need to do more. I think our governments and our regional institutions, including the African Union, have put in place frameworks. The recognition is there, but we still have a long way to go. The potential remains huge, and we are yet to tap into this. And I think the timing of this is important as well. COVID-19 and its challenges make it ever more urgent for us to look at the diaspora and migration as a development driver, a development factor. I want to end by highlighting that the ECA and the African Diaspora Network, along with the many partners that are here today, including the private sector, the academia, and other institutions, could come together and continue to advance this agenda by looking at a few critical areas that are important. One is, of course, the efforts that are required to make available more robust, reliable, and regular data on this agenda. Migration more broadly, but of course the diaspora and their engagement with Africa's development agenda. The other is really how to leverage technology, digitization, and innovation to ensure that we elevate this agenda well beyond where it is now and really tap into the potential that remains untapped with respect to the role of the diaspora in Africa's development. A fourth really is to look at identifying and targeting areas of investment and engagement, economic engagement of the diaspora in the continent that are emerging, that are growing, and that will continue to grow in the future. And the industries and the sectors where we can encourage diaspora engagement and investment as well. I would also think that it's really important to continue the advocacy as we're doing today, to continue the discussion. And it's really great to see, Almaz, the different forums and platforms where ADN is doing this. Certainly as ECA in the African continent, we play quite a critical role in supporting the sort of agenda setting, policy debate, the visibility of the agenda. And I can assure you that we'll continue to do that as we have been doing. And we continue to be committed to the partnership with you, and of course other actors that are here with us today and would want to join hands on this important agenda. So thank you very much. I'm very excited about the discussions we're going to have. And back over to you, Almaz.
Thank you, Edlam. This is fantastic. You talk about exactly what we need to do. Really, there's a lot of important thing you discussed, but one of them that we must do and continue to do, and we do this at ADN, I'm very grateful, that whole public-private partnership, and then bringing at its core the diaspora to be the force that it is, but also really to make sure that other people are engaged. The issue of Africa is not going to be solved only by Africans. We have friends of Africa who care about the continent. It is our job to be ambassadors for Africa and engage them as we see. And that private sector includes everyone else besides just Africans from the diaspora. So there's a huge opportunity, and thank you for opening remarks that is so inspiring and engaging. And I look forward to working with you. All of us here would be very delighted to support what ECA is doing on the policy side and now what we're doing on the mobilization side, and how do we bring these two things together. That's very critical. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Professor Fall to take the stage briefly to say a little bit about you, and then get us into the diaspora and the state of the diaspora, especially on remittances. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Almaz, and good morning, good afternoon to colleagues and friends and participants all over the world. I had the privilege of getting involved in diaspora and development in the mid-1990s through the African Foundation for Development effort in the UK. That was followed up with involvement with the first high-level dialogue on international migration and development in 2006. to the start of the Global Forum for Migration and Development. And several years ago, I helped found the African Diaspora Platform in Europe, which is called ADEPT. In relation to the topic today, the contextual introduction is on diaspora remittances and resources. For that, we need to qualify that we're speaking purely financial, not the different types of diaspora resources, just the financial resources. And when we talk of the financial resources, I want to highlight a number of sort of classifications or definitions to just help the context. We do have the remittances, which we are very familiar with, and we'll talk about it today. But there are two other sort of sisters to remittances, which are less well known. That is diaspora savings and diaspora investment. Now, because investment is defined very specifically in international law, it is important to get some sort of classification of the lump sum of these financial diaspora resources. In 2018, I had the opportunity to start work with the African Union regarding the mandate that the heads of government had given them in 2012 around developing an African Diaspora Investment Fund. And in that work, I offered 4 classifications of these financial resources, of which 2 would be relevant to our discussions today. The first category is diaspora philanthropy, that I would call development investment. The data on it, specifics, is a very small. We have a lot of anecdotal data on diaspora philanthropy, all the help, the GoFundMe projects that we do, but we don't have good solid data because no one is tracking it. Second is socioeconomic investment, and that is diaspora remittances, because in international law, remittances is not investment. So I define it as socioeconomic investment. Diaspora remittances, we know the numbers because the World Bank, amongst others, track it. And as Edlam had just reminded us, in 2020, it was almost 80 billion for Africa. And of course, 2020 was an unusual year. But in 2019, it was 86 billion. The third category is diaspora direct investment. This is where the diaspora are investing in enterprises in Africa and actively involved in the management of those enterprises. Again, the numbers on these are not known because nobody in the world monitors it. So the institutions like UNCTAD that monitor foreign direct investments do not monitor DDI, diaspora direct investment. And in some cases, diaspora direct investment is found and spread in the figures of FDI and remittances. And the fourth categorization is diaspora portfolio investment. Again, with this, portfolio investment is monitored globally, but diaspora portfolio investment is not monitored. So these are the 4 main types of diaspora financial resources. Now, some other context as to the importance of these diaspora resources to Africa. I always like to remind people, in case there is doubt as to the need for diaspora resources in Africa. The economy of the entire Africa, including the big economies of South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, so forth, all of them put together is the same as the GDP of the United Kingdom. It's the same as the GDP of India. So there is the 2.6 trillion crop, which is all of Africa, United Kingdom, France, India, roughly all of them are around that. So Germany, the economy of Germany at 3.8 is bigger than the economy of all of Africa. Of course, Japan is at 5 trillion. So I'm not even going on China and United States. So that's an important context to remember. Then you have what are the inflows of these forms of investment to Africa. The smallest of these global flows, apart from trade, is of course overseas development assistance, so-called aid. And for that, by 2019, it was 500 billion, half a trillion. And Africa gets quite a lot of that, 155 billion, about 30%. But of course, that includes the concessional loans and all of the other tied projects. But if you come to strictly the investment part, portfolio investment between 2013 and 2017 was 4 trillion globally, of which Africa received only 72 billion. That is 1.8%. That's on portfolio investment. On foreign direct investment, 2017-2019, it was 4.75 trillion, of which Africa received 138 billion, which is about 2.3%. So these numbers are small. So the evidence that Africans will have to help Africans in investment speaks for itself, because the global figures, they are derisory, as it were. So now, can the African diaspora fill in this gap in any meaningful way? Of course, all of us involved in diaspora development have been saying, yes, it is. And I'll give you a couple of numbers on that as I close my introductory remarks. On the remittance flows, I'm going to take 2020 as an exceptional year given the pandemic. But if you take the 86 billion of 2019, that are the remittances that has gone through official means and method. When I did my study for the African Union for 2018-2019, I estimated that 86 billion, we all agree is an underestimate, but I estimated that the real figure is likely to be 200 billion. That is remittances by Africans to Africa per year. The 86 billion goes through formal means, and the World Bank, who is the authority on this monitoring, says that the informal means is likely to be 100% of the formal means. So that can give you anything from another 80 billion to even more. But there is one other category of remittances, financial, that is not counted. And that is what I call remittance in kind. In some cases, your cousin may say, I am starting a business and I need money from you. So you would send, say, $1,000, and that's counted as remittances to help them with their cash flow. But you may buy equipment for them worth $3,000, and that's sent, and that is not counted. So 2018-2019, my estimate was 200 billion. Now, if we leave the remittances and we come to other forms of financial resources of the diaspora, and I take diaspora savings, the most conservative estimate of the amount of savings, average savings of migrants in Europe and North America, according to World Bank studies, is $1,980. And if we then take the conservative estimate of the number of African first-generation migrants of 17 million, that means, in my estimate, this was in 2019, that diaspora savings of the African diaspora was at $33.7 billion, sitting there in Europe or North Africa, not invested in Africa. And of course, that does not count the Atlantic diaspora, African Americans and Africans in Canada. And for that, if you take the 40 million Africans in North America, taking from a low estimate of savings of 1,000, to $5,000, the savings in that category can be anything from 40 billion to 200 billion. So that gives the context. Now, in the discussions, we will look at what the African institutions, particularly the AU, is doing. But I would just summarize saying that the AU made a commitment in 2012 at the Global African Diaspora Summit that an African Diaspora Investment Fund will be set up. It had a very slow start. In 2018-19, I was commissioned to do the study for them, which was submitted in 2019. It was validated in 2019, but 2020 COVID-19 hit. The good news is I can tell you, and I think colleagues from the African Union are in the call, that in May of 2021, the Specialized Technical Committee gave an interim endorsement for the formation of this fund. And on October 6th and 7th, they will have another deliberation to look at it. And hopefully they would then press the button and say the formal work should start in partnership with institutions like UNECA, the commercial institutions, and of course the diaspora. Thank you so much, Almas, and over to you.
Thank you, Jibril. This is great. It's great to see you. The last time we saw each other was in Johannesburg, but I am hoping to see you again in person. I think one of the takeaway from the numbers, the very small numbers of direct investment or otherwise that comes to Africa, the one I took is Africa does need help. Africans need to develop. Africa needs diasporans to help develop the continent. And that's critical, and it's doable because we see it happen, even though it is not as massive as we want it. It is happening, but having a platform that you're working on with the AU and others would really help create a system in place where we can actually count and see what the impact is of the diaspora investment, not just remittances. I'm talking about investments that are scalable, that can help communities outside their families and parents. Diaspora can do that, and they're doing it in some areas, and we look forward to engaging more of the diaspora with all kinds of different opportunities to do this. So thank you for setting that context for us, Dr. Jibril Fall. I'm going to go to Aurea. Aurea, I had a great opportunity to hear what you do during our meeting way about a month ago or 6 weeks ago. And I was very taken by the work that you're doing on creating innovative financing systems and the exploration, not necessarily just doing it under the SDG finance. So if you could just briefly introduce yourself and just share with us some of your findings from your work in development finance assessment and their linkage with remittances and diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Almas. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to you, Megan, and the colleagues from ECA for the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Aurea. I'm based in Pretoria, and I work for the Africa Finance Sector Hub that UNDP established. My work since 2014 has been to dedicate in the support of the financing for development agenda in Africa. So this includes looking into leveraging and bringing together all the financing flows, absolutely beyond the concept of official development assistance, ODA or aid, but really making sure that we leverage and bring together all the opportunities of resources that can contribute to the development of the continent. So one core element in this process where we have agreements with ministries of finance under an initiative that is called the Integrated National Financing Framework has been the development finance assessment. And this has been our opening the window, I would say, to realizing that most of countries in Africa have different ways to tap into the resources, and of course, looking into the mobilization and enhancing the mobilization of the domestic revenues, but also really tapping into the opportunity of what remittances can be and can contribute for the local development, but also as Professor Faul was saying, which I really like the classification into 4 levels. But all those opportunities through instruments on financing. So some core aspects and some key issues that we've been doing as part of this exercise was trying to collect what was happening here and there, not building from scratch. And we know we are never going to reinvent the wheel. And there are very good initiatives that have been happening, not only in the continent, which a lot has happened, but also in other regions too. So, well, allow me to refer to some of these ideas, which I was able to collect. There is, of course, this importance of what the digital finance and the mobile money gives to the issue of remittances and remittances transfer. But very importantly, it is imperative to ensure that remittances markets are enhanced and partnerships between the mobile transfer operators, the post offices, the banks are diversified. As otherwise, what we're doing is imposing a de facto tax on remittances to the senders and the recipients of remittances. And there is an issue of exclusive agreements that has come under, well, criticism by key central banks in a number of governments in Africa. Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and Tunisia, and particularly Senegal and Tunisia, have informed all licensed intermediates that exclusive contracts were no longer permitted under the existing rules. I think that these are key good practices that we've been able to detect, that we want to, raise the voice of this and, try to scale up. Also, there is a clear opportunity on what digital currencies can bring into the whole market of remittances. And when it comes to bridging those complications of foreign exchange policies. In the Philippines, for example, the case of Bloom Remit, it was a web-based platform, and I'm happy to share more information on this through the founder of this startup. But it's a web-based platform that enables mobile transfer operators to convert, to transfer, and to settle funds, seamlessly and compliantly across the borders. And lastly, there is another very interesting initiative that was undertaken under the Pakistan Remittance Initiative, where tax credit was offered to remittance service providers equal to the reduction of the fees that were being paid by remittance senders and recipients. And of course, so that's for innovation and what we've been able to capture when it comes to transfer of remittances. But then when it comes to vehicles to promote the diaspora investment, you have, the case that is very well known by, the diaspora bonds, how Nigeria, established these diaspora bonds, and Ethiopia with this Ethiopian Electric Power Corporation that issue this bond and appeal the investors because it also offers this repayment in convertible currency. But we also need to understand that not all diaspora is interested in investing in the national big infrastructure projects, and we are aware that through this mapping of financing opportunities, there is a lot to do at local level. And there is a very interesting case that we brought last year in a meeting also from Moldova, where crowdfunding was used for diaspora to invest in local projects. But this was, it was putting a strong emphasis in the issue of trust. Trust is a crucial issue when it comes to diaspora and mobilizing diaspora, and we know that. And in Moldova, there were 38 localities that piloted that model of engaging diaspora with that approach of leveraging that local investment through trust building, meaning diaspora was contributing with a 10%, and the rest was being put by the government, by the local municipalities. So it was being leveraged, and that was the incentive, and that was, a way to recuperate, the trust, no, and also promote that transparency in the process of implementing and spending these projects. There is a last example that I want to share, and I'm going to close it here. It's the investment club in Senegal. This was established, set up as a system to channel investment also at the community development, and included two elements. One that was around building, financing, and legal structures, so setting up those legal instruments for investment. But the other one was particularly looking into offering financial education. So all that has to do with digital and mobile finance literacy, so that the recipient families could also use and make use of these technologies so that they could also invest. And I'm going to stop there. I hope I didn't went too much beyond, but thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Oria. I think you bring up some really important subject to learn from other diasporas. No diaspora knows everything. And I have actually personally studied the Irish diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, the Philippine diaspora, especially because it's one of the most, the largest exporter of human capital in the world, one of the largest. And they have created different kind of methods on how to scale remittances, how to help parents and families to get away from dependency on remittances. There's some really great studies that have been done so far. And I think learning from these different platforms can actually go to the crux of what you said earlier. One of the pain point of remittances is paying taxes on both ends. The fees are pretty high. And how do you reduce the fees? And I think you have a point there. And these are still in exploration, testing. Experiment is good, but then at some point, I do hope we reach the point of scalability and sustainability. So thank you, Oria. I'm gonna go to Toko. Toko, you have advocated and you really want to talk specifically on how to leverage the diaspora's remittances and other gifts for the benefit of households and national economies in the countries of origin and destination. The floor is yours to go over this and give us your input and encourage us to step away from some of the assumptions and get a little bit messy, because this is a messy process, but it's a very necessary one.
Thank you very much, Almaz. And I recognize the distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I think there is a critical need to strategically harness and activate the diaspora as one of the driving forces in sustainable economic development of the continent. And both Oria and Jibril did speak to this. We cannot underestimate how strategically important the diaspora is. But an important question is, what in practice strategically harnessing and activating diaspora contribution to Africa's development will look like? I would like to respond to this question with several suggested ways in which the growing role and importance of African diaspora can be embedded in the continent's development whilst retaining a strong gender emphasis. And I could not but bring in the gender dimension here because it's crucial. And often we forget the importance of women, especially women in the diaspora. Let me look at remittances. And I know Jibril spoke about the levels of remittances, and I want to emphasize them. And for a growing number of Africans, and Jibril, you did allude to that, for a growing number of the African countries, remittances constitute a significant percentage of their national GDPs. The top 5 countries in 2020 where remittances traditionally constituted a significant share of the GDP were South Sudan with 34.4%, Lesotho with 21.3%, the Gambia with 15.5%, Zimbabwe, my own country, with 13.5%, and Cape Verde with 11.7%. That's quite significant. Furthermore, these remittances have proven their resilience as a source for foreign direct investments. And again, Jibril did speak to this. And crucial for direct support to households despite the impact of COVID. In many African countries, as we all know, remittances also contribute to a growing source of foreign currency. They are actually a major source of foreign currencies. And I'm sure you all know that these remittances are also a crucial safety net for households. They provide access to services such as health, education, food, water, sanitation, electricity, or other energy sources and transport. And for a large number of families who rely on remittances, they cannot manage without the remittances that are coming from the diaspora. During the pandemic, interestingly, remittances to some countries in Africa showed a short-term counter-cyclical trend. Members of the diaspora appear to have continued sending assistance to families back home, including by dipping into their own savings and using more formal channels than they ordinarily would because of the reduction in carrying cash on the person. This was almost virtually closed because of the lockdowns in various countries. It appears that in some countries of destination, the access to COVID-19 relief cash assistance offered enabled some of these members of the diaspora to send remittances despite loss to their own income. These trends defied expected declines and demonstrated the resilience of remittances during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know how crucial this was because during lockdown, the informal sector that would normally augment the amounts that are coming from remittances were under lockdown and were not operating. There is tremendous potential to harness the development impact from remittances because, and I want to emphasize this because it's important for government and it's critical for governments to recognize this. And I will look at a number of points. One, there is room to reduce the high costs and thereby have more transfers reaching households. Two, reduce the use of informal channels of remittances transfers by leveraging free movement protocols that allow irregular migrants to send remittances without fear of detection. And I think this is so crucial. And we need to look at how the AfCFTA can provide that opportunity. And Edlam did speak to that. Three, increase the benefits of the use of mobile funds transfer, where the continent is leading in the world through services such as M-Pesa. We all know the M-Pesa in Kenya. And four, provide incentives linked to transfer volumes such as cash back programs for diaspora sending funds and investing in their countries of origin. I know a few countries have started doing this and it does help. It is an incentive. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Compact on Migration that both Edlam and myself spoke to, the Objective 19 actually says create conditions for migrants and diasporas to fully contribute to sustainable development in all countries. So it does provide for that to happen, and member states need to take recognition of this. And clearly goes beyond only just tapping into remittances. Well-planned skill development of African population would ensure that they earn higher wages relative to those of other lower skilled nationals in countries of destinations, such as the Gulf Cooperation countries, Europe, North America, and Australia. On the other hand, members of diaspora do bring critical skills to their countries of origin that often spark entrepreneurial enterprises as well as innovation. Let me give an example. Indian migrants who filled the gap to work in the surging IT sector in North America, which had created a huge demand for IT skills. Those who returned to India set up IT companies that created employment for local talent and thus acted as a counterweight to continuing immigration of skilled labor. And I've seen this happen in a number of countries in Africa, where they come back with those skills and start setting up businesses as well as supporting. But related to the skills is the potential for diaspora to bring technology transfers and innovative ideas back to their countries of their countries of origin, and spark entrepreneurship innovation with services and solutions that are designed to meet their unique needs, both in destination countries and in countries of origin. This term used to be described as the brain gain or reverse technology transfer, and has been applied especially in the medical field. And in Ethiopia, where I was, I know how the medical field benefited so much from those skills. Members of the diaspora have also contributed to bringing back investment in industrial development and infrastructure to their home countries. They do so by investing in their countries of origin and encouraging others to do the same. Sometimes forming networks and groups that work together, and thus boosting investor confidence by sharing their knowledge and also bringing in investors to support. In many countries, especially many African countries, members of the diaspora have influenced economic liberalization where they are allowed to vote. And it's critical that we look at this because the power of the ballot is so crucial and they could influence a lot. And they engage, including in the selection of representatives and their participation in development initiatives. Governments in some cases have tended to respond by providing tax incentives on their remittances and other investments through including issuing of diaspora bonds, which others did speak to. And I think it's crucial that governments does look at this. Another way that diaspora contributes is through exports and establishment of transnational trading networks. They buy products from their country of origin through nostalgia trade, creating an export demand for those products. Actually, the other day, I was reading about these transnational trade networks in Australia and how they've effectively worked by bringing products from their home countries. They introduce these products to their countries of destination and they become popular and they open up trade networks. And this has increased intra-trade beyond intra-trade on the continent. Diaspora communities with women at the forefront have also contributed to cultural diversity in cuisine, art, and fashion in countries of origin and destination. I'm sure we all know how popular our tie and dye is, and I'm showing this. And it has grown in the countries of origin, brought by African women in the diaspora, increasing the trade in fabrics that are coming from the continent. This occurs at individual levels through sometimes not just trade, but through intermarriages, through many diaspora organizations that get together and share what is coming from their countries, both in terms of dress, in terms of cuisine, opening up opportunities to start businesses in the countries of receipt. Diaspora media agencies have also become instrumental in keeping members informed of events at home and help them to retain cultural linkages. So we should not just look at profit. We should also not look at livelihoods only. We should look at all these cultural links that the diaspora does bring in. As diaspora becomes more politically active in countries of origin and destination, they also contribute to offsetting political risks in countries of origin through shaping progressive reforms and diplomacy. And we know how often governments are reluctant to let the diaspora engage, but where they engage, the continent has benefited. There's been also a growing involvement of women in diaspora in politically elected offices when they return to their countries of origin and in countries of diaspora. Diaspora holds potential to counterbalance national subservience linked to national debt by their growing contribution to the GDP, the FDI, and foreign exchange earnings in countries of origin. So we need to look across all the different spectrum that I've looked at: skills, culture, investments, entrepreneurship, moving goods across the different continents, from the country of origin to a country of receipt. So you can see where we can leverage the diaspora. And I think it's critical for governments to start looking at the positive that the diaspora brings and how we can leverage and make sure that it benefits the diaspora in the countries where they are, so that they have an incentive to send remittances, to engage with the people at home, and to engage across the whole continent. Thank you, Almaz.
Thank you so much, Toko. I know there was a lot of things that you've mentioned, but I can tell the audience that I do know about the fashion and Toko's life. In fact, one of her friends who gave her a gift was, I think it was a dress in some kind of an Ethiopian dress or an African dress. And one of them said, I can't wait to go around in Ghana to buy African fabrics with you. So you can tell that she dresses well. All of it made in Africa, and you're the greatest image of what beauty in Africa looks like. So thank you, and I can't wait to come and buy myself what I need to buy. So it's really wonderful that you've mentioned. You also talked about the importance of reducing the fee to send remittances and to receive remittances. That's very, very critical. And then, of course, increasing the mobile money transfer. But the other thing you mentioned that's a big, we don't know, which is actually Professor Fall spoke about, is the underground remittances that go back and forth to family. We don't know. It hasn't been counted. And I think that is another opportunity to use probably mobile technology to transfer and somehow to understand what that impact is. But lastly, mention about governments really connecting and engaging the diaspora. It really, I always say, behooves them to do that, because anything they do otherwise, it's a divestment. A lot of diasporans don't have families there either. So there's a very generational diaspora that the governments need to engage. And I think that's a wonderful insight. And I do hope that we will continue to work with UNECA and other policymakers to get that word out. One good thing about that is many countries in Africa, not a lot, but many have already adopted that concept, and a lot of them do have chief diaspora engagement officer. Some of them are within the embassies where the diaspora is. Some of them are within government, and I believe in some areas there are cabinet positions as well. So that's a big beginning, a good beginning to what can come in the future on diaspora engagement. We have about a few minutes, and I'm going to go to Professor Fall first to give his point of view on one of the things that we need an insight is, can you share your insight on the best method for organizations that want to be a part of implementing these development goals? How can the diaspora get involved in the plan? And I think this has to do mostly with what you're doing with the Africa Union and other work that you're doing. So I think it would be great if you can share that, Professor Fall, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Almas. And given the time limitation, I'll focus on the African Union proposal. Of course, there are many things going on. But as I said, the African Union is working to create an African Diaspora Finance Corporation as a mechanism to promote and to channel in diaspora investment through three main methods. One is continental diaspora bonds, that is moving away from Ethiopia, Ghana, or Nigeria diaspora bond, but continental. That in a way also means friends of Africa to be investing in those bonds, and individuals, African diaspora, who may not be interested in investing in their own country of origin, but somewhere else. So that's one important product line. The other are mutual funds. as commercial products that exist. And the third one is around innovative finance. I won't go into the detail of it, but it's on innovative finance, on remit aid, whereby there would be a form of remittance matching or remittance tax relief by partner governments across the world. Now, that as a structure, the important element is the AU will not own it or run it, but they will cause the opening up of a whole new ecology of diaspora finance. And there's a successful precedence of that in Africa. About 30-something years ago, sorry, it's nearly 40 years now, the West Africans thought that international banking within West Africa was in an absolute terrible mess. So ECOWAS, through its fund, started what is now EcoBank as one of the biggest continental banks in Africa. So the causation of continental banking in Africa, as we know it now, was started by a multilateral agency, ECOWAS. So in doing that, they created a whole new ecology. Similarly, the African Development Bank was asked by its African members to promote import-export credit financing. That caused the creation of Afrexim Bank. And Afrexim Bank is now one of the most innovative and powerful financial institutions in Africa. So this is what the AU is trying to do next. That is open up that ecology, not on continental regional banking, not on import-export, but on diaspora finance. And where it is now, in the validation meeting it did in November of 2019 in Cairo, the African Union recognized diaspora organizations were represented. UNECA, in fact, Gideon, who's on the call, was there. African Development Bank, Afrexim Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, EcoBank, and a number of other commercial members. But we had the gap in 2020. Now, if, and hopefully October, the AU would press the button and say, go ahead, then it would open up a new dialogue to re-engage with all of these institutions, the African diaspora through African organizations, ADN and many others, but importantly, to also the older African diaspora. Because remember, for the AU, a Zimbabwean living in South Africa is not diaspora. A Nigerian living in Egypt is not diaspora. It's the Africans who live outside of the continent, and that includes the African Americans. The African Americans, many of them in their hundreds of thousands, will be interested in investing in products, in financial products that serve the development of Africa. And some of the financial institutions I've mentioned some of them have high rating in terms of credit worthiness. African Finance Corporation, Afrexim Bank, to command global respect for investment. So it is anticipated that the African Development Finance Corporation would follow along those lines and attract diaspora investment from the new old African diaspora and also the friends of the diaspora. Thank you.
You know, Jibril, you just said something that we care about so deeply at ADN. We have been manifesting this, living it for the last 11 years, which is the Continental Diaspora Fund. You mentioned that as a name, but at ADN, we've been saying the issue of Africa cannot be solved only by Africans, but as I said earlier, also by Friends of Africa. This provides then an opportunity for also not only just Friends of Africa, but those of us who are not really directly connected to the home country for many reasons. A lot of it has to do politics, mistrust, and then we will have opportunities to invest, an Ethiopian investing in Nigeria, vice versa, Ghanaian investing in Senegal. Those are opportunities that we have been sharing with our network so many years through forums to see something that is available and for people that can trust. And I saw a message earlier by my friend Martin that was going on the chats, is to do investment, there gotta be first trust, and that is going to take time. And I do look to you and others who are working with Africa Union to bring in the organization like us at the table to make sure the diaspora is engaged and mobilized. At the end of the day, if the diaspora is going to use the tools, then it really is important to bring that at the beginning so that the trust is built, and then the organization can become spokespeople or mobilizers of these funds. So I'm really looking forward to working with you and others on this, because it's very critical, it's very important, and this is just why we're doing this. I also want to say to the audience, the reason you're having this kind of deep discussion on remittances is because we were able to bring the very people who are engaged in this opportunity, but also in the space as a whole. And so I'm very grateful to each of you for making a very deep conversation on remittances. There is no easy way out on this one. We have to continue this. We'll talk at the end, but this is fantastic, and thank you very much. I'm gonna go to Aurea and ask you briefly to mention what efforts are being taken to further the impact of SDG finance. What can we do? Use this as your last version of a conversation for today, and please give us your input on that. So Aurea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alba. And I want to collect what was shared by the distinguished panelist. There is this importance that, well, through our existing partnerships with ministries of finance in a number of countries, where we were mapping all the financing opportunities to implement and support the implementation of the national recovery or the national development plans, we came across in a number of countries, and I'm not talking only at the political level, but also at the technocrat level, there is this recognition that remittances is the untapped opportunity. But through our development finance assessment reports, we've been able also to identify that, as it was raised already, the issue of trust is very important. The idea of formalizing relationship through compacts, looking into specific incentives, not only on civil rights or as, for example, Ethiopia has done, but looking into specific tax incentives and tax expenditures oriented towards the investment or the engagement of diaspora initially. The other big issue is the issue of coherence. We had an initial discussion among ourselves. Yes, there is a need to set up specific frameworks that are going to channel and prioritize and put in its place what remittances are and what diaspora investment can do for the development of a country. But in some cases, this has been established already. But those are separate policies or even separate offices that are not integrated into what the development policies or what the government of the Prime Minister's office wants to implement. So there is this issue of where do we place the policies, the regulatory environment, the institutions that will have to deal with remittances and diaspora, and this idea of creating coordination and coherence. How do we talk with Ministry of Finance? How do we talk with central banks? How do we align with the National Development Planning Commission or the Ministry of Planning? So this is crucial, and this is what we're trying to settle through this INFF initiative. And we are now, as UNDP, together with the bigger UN family, and we had this 4 weeks ago, a training with our colleagues from ECA on how we are supporting countries implementing and setting up integrated financing strategies. So financing strategies that will bring and align, as we were saying before, public finance, but also private finance and private actors. And this is diaspora. So how we will build coherence between all those blocks, between what tax and fiscal policies will be about, what budgetary policies will be about to implement the national development priorities, but where do the private actors come, and creating those legal instruments so that this can be facilitated and everyone can contribute. This comes along with the setup of those governing mechanisms for accountability, for transparency, for the proper whole of society participation. We see that the role of the UN in this discourse of the bigger financing for development agenda is to make sure that we take care of the economic governance aspects. We have other partners that have this tradition as the World Bank and the IMF to work in these financing agendas, but we do know what are the other realities and how we give importance to those human rights principles such as participation, transparency, and accountability. So this is the other big element. We want to build those financing strategies, create coordination, create that internal coherence. Lastly, I want to say, digital. The opportunity of the digital finance, the digital remittances. We know that is out there. Many of us are illiterate. When we talk about trainings for local communities, we also need to be trained about this. But how do we tap into these opportunities? We know what Panama has done with this cryptocurrency. We know why there are some challenges, at the bigger IMF level and international economic forum level. But we see that there are some opportunities that might be constructive and might be positive also for the different African countries. So the last point is the diversification of the partnerships, opening up the frontiers of those partnerships between the banks, the mobile net transfer operators, and the post offices. And establish, even in the context of the AFTA, the African Free Trade Continental Agreement, this perspective of how, if we had cross-border regulations, we could enable, we could expand and give opportunities and go beyond the Western Unions and MoneyGram, and avoid that they maintain that dominant position, and make those mobile transfer cheaper, which at the end, they are the SDG goal 10C that we are all aiming. We need to make those transfers cheaper for the people that we serve. So thanks again. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's very, very well said. I do I continue to believe that formalizing relationships, building trust, and providing incentives are going to be critical to this discussion and dialogue as we try to engage the diaspora. I'm going to ask Toko to just finally say something, which is an issue that is impacting global community, but I'm sure it's impacting our community even more in Africa. Talk about how COVID impacted social development and what measures are being taken to mitigate the negative impact that has come from COVID, and what can the diaspora do? I'm sorry to rush you, Toko, but we have some really great questions. I'm gonna ask the audience to be patient with us for a few minutes, but the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Almas. I'll be very brief. And since I've just come from ECA, and I'll speak about what ECA is doing. And I think that's where the diaspora can play a critical role. And of course, Jibril did talk about the role of Frexim Bank, which ECA has leveraged on to work with them, with the African Union CDC, to work with the Special Envoy on Vaccines. I want to speak to vaccinations because they are crucial. And a large percentage of Africa is not vaccinated. And what basically they are looking at is how to support countries accessing vaccinations so that the populations can be vaccinated. Because what we are looking at is movement of people. What we are looking at, people getting back to work. What we are looking at, people getting back to trade. And this is where the diaspora can come in. They are also looking at how can the continent, and this is where the AFCFTA comes in as well, where we are talking about industrialization, start producing drugs. And once we start producing drugs, it means we can start producing our own vaccines. And where can the diaspora come in? The diaspora can come in and influence the big international organizations and pharmaceuticals in the North, where vaccinations, drugs, and we know the majority of the drugs on the continent are important. How can the diaspora leverage and influence the support for the continent? And ECA has played a critical role in ensuring that member states do access vaccinations. I'm bringing vaccinations because it's not an issue that we've discussed within the migration conversation. And I think we need to. We talk about the movement of resources to the continent. How can we, when we are not mobile? And we cannot be mobile when we are not vaccinated. How can we be mobile when the majority of the people on the continent do not have access? They do not have access at all. And I'm bringing this, Almaz, because it's not a topic that we brought in, and it's unusual in the migration and the diaspora context for us to talk about vaccinations, and I think we should start doing that.
Thank you so much for saying that. I'm just going to share some great news. We actually, into the end, what Toko just mentioned, we need to create our vaccination. And I think that's very critical. And there is the might and the ability to do it, but funding is always critical. But I also want to say that ADN received a pilot project to test telehealth medicine to mobilize the diaspora. As you know, there are more doctors, African doctors in the diaspora than there are in the continent. So what we have received funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to explore this. The exploration will begin soon in October. We're going to start to put the pieces together, but I will reach out. And if any one of you is interested in helping us develop the business plan that comes out of it, please do send me your resume. Send it to Megan. She has been your key. This is our opportunity to engage you, especially those of you in the continent. I would like to see your resume. I would like you to be the ones to help us to develop this. I didn't know when I was going to announce this, but Toko, you're always an angel. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think at the end of the day, we have to find a way to own the space, because there is an intellectual and there's also financial might that we can bring here. And I'm very thankful to the Gates Foundation for interesting us. This is going to be a pilot, but our goal is to make that pilot into a reality. And I will report on this in the future. I know there are so many questions that the audience have asked, and I'm not sure if we have enough time, but can I just ask you one question that any one of you can address? Although there was one question that was recommended that probably Toko answers. And the question was, I'm curious to hear more on the diaspora who are purely interested to invest in their skills and expertise. How can we tap into that? So maybe it's Toko, or maybe it's Fal, but any one of you, if you could answer that question, then we will go into the closing remark. And those of you whose questions have not been answered, please trust me, we will send you some summary and action report that will include and encapsulate all these questions in that summary, as we've done over and over several times within ADN. We don't just do events, we actually provide you with content and with the video of the recording of today's convening. I don't know if it's Fal or Toko that can answer that question. Toko?
I think both of us, and I'll let Jibril start. Jibril?
Oh, okay. Toko, I'll leave the question about the other forms of resources and just perhaps comment on the financial one. And that would also be my closing remarks. Some of you who are familiar with my usual rantings would remember that I'm a bit sort of almost tired of the extended discussions on policy. From long ago as 2013 with the high-level dialogue, I've been crying out saying that we need to enter an era of implementation. And now that we've got the Global Compact, which has given us an overall framework, my argument is for all of these brilliant suggestions that we have, we shouldn't spend too much time on the intellectual analysis of the policies. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but we should only spend minimal time on it. 80% or more of our time should be based on practice, where we try this out, we try to do it in reality. Because the diaspora in some way are doing it, only that it's not been recognized. So particularly for countries and institutions, they need to catch up with practice and then bring the power of the might of their institutions to this. We've seen countries like Moldova, Pakistan, Senegal, and others who have taken this approach where they are focusing on the practice. Sometimes it does not work 100%, but the lessons from it are far more important than the evaluation reports on policies. I myself had the privilege of writing the diaspora strategy for Moldova, finished in 2015. And I have seen how they've picked several points from it and they've run with it in terms of implementation. In 2016, at the UN Summit for Refugees and Migrants, I presented a paper which ended up being published, and it was called Over-Principled and Underperforming. And I still put that as a challenge to all of us, that what we say, the things we say and the principles that we adhere to is enough. We've got enough of those to get on with the practice and get on with the competency. And finally, I'll just make the point as it relates to diaspora resources and finance. Take diaspora bonds and all of the chat we talk about diaspora bonds. In all of this discussion, there's only 4 countries in Africa by 2020 that had issued a diaspora bond. Only 4. When you hear the rhetoric and the literature, you would think maybe there have been 50 bonds. 4, 2007 Ghana, 2011 Ethiopia, 2011 Kenya, 2017 Nigeria. And of these 4, only 25% succeeded. That is one country, Nigeria. Ghana bond was undersubscribed. Ethiopia bond failed on several levels, including regulation in the United States. They had to return money. Kenya undersubscribed. Nigeria was the only success, and there's some concern that many of the buyers were institutional. In the AU study, by the way, the summary have been published by AU since 2019, and the full 125 page is still with the member states. We have looked at this in detail, and there are enough lessons to allow us to be able to do something that's not only more competent, but it opens up the scaling up. And lastly, on that approach, I think a plural approach, a pluralist approach is the best, where anything that sounds like a good idea, let us say yes to it, let's try it, rather than spending several years trying to micro-analyze whether it would work or not. The countries that succeed, they don't do that. They get on with the practice. And who knows, they may learn something in the failures of implementation. Thank you, and over to you, Elmas.
Thank you so much, Toko. Everyone, Oria, thank you for this incredible conversation. This will go on. We're not done. We will have an opportunity to summarize all that was said today and come back to all of you who participated with us today and others who have not had the opportunity to come with what the next steps are. There was a lot of things said today, but the takeaways for me was that the trust is crucial. Trust to address with mobilizing the diaspora through transparency and building with community organization is very, very critical. The need for the diaspora to be a part of socioeconomic development of the country through various mechanisms, investment, continental banking, remittance sending, and I know supporting family is very critical. The other takeaway for me personally was what Tokoyi said about how the parents' families in many African countries depend on remittances to buy food, to take care of their families, healthcare, every single transportation, all the things that they need. They will not be able to do it without remittances. The question that I've always asked is, what happens when that person who sent the remittances is no longer available? And that's why the remittances, scaling remittances and trying to do that intercontinental fund that is being built by, whether by African Union or others, how can we tap into that so we can also invest in these communities so they don't become dependent, rather they thrive and survive on their own. And so I'm very thankful to each one of you. I think for me, personally, this has been something I wanted to do with you and ECA for a very long time. And I thank Gideon, I thank you, Toko, for helping us make this possible. Dr. Fall, it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you, and Oria. Thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you for participating. You will hear the next step is we'll send out a summary, a recording, and next steps, action steps. We will first share with the speakers, especially with Gideon. And once we summarize what the next steps are, we'll share with everyone. And I do encourage you to continue to be engaged with each other. Trust is not built in a vacuum. It's built in relationship with each other, being at the table, even when it's uncomfortable. And I think, Jabril, you have a point. We cannot just talk about policy. We must implement something, and we can fail, and it's okay to fail, but we have to test, fail, and then start to come back again. I mean, in Silicon Valley, there is a saying, fail fast, fail forward. And we got to do that too in Africa. Why not? We take risks. The first risk diaspora takes is leaving their country. So we are risk takers. We are entrepreneurs at the core. And we know how to take risks, and we know how to mitigate. The thing is, we just have to really trust each other, make something happen, and do not second guess each other. Let's take each other at face value, regardless of what we have in our mind, and then see if we can make what we can, if we can help in any way we can to either provide our talent, our resources, and other things that we might be able to have to make available to those in need. So that way we can see a continent in our eyes, the continent that we want to see thrive and support its community. And we do ask the government to take the responsibility to make that possible as well. This is not just one way. The governments have to do their job, and the diaspora has to continue to send remittances to support their families, but still think about using some of the savings that we have to invest into these intercontinental funds that are being developed. So I'm looking forward to learning more, Jabril, to work with you and to see if we can engage, how we can engage our diaspora community throughout the United States and around the world. And with that, I thank my team, Deborah Pasio and Megan Hansberger and Gideon. Thank you for making this possible today, and have a wonderful evening, a wonderful afternoon, and good morning to everyone in California. Thank you.